Well, it's been almost 2 years, and our family is, since we moved out here to greater Los Angeles here in Long Beach, and our family is thriving in life and ministry together here. Um, the kids are assimilated and making friends, and we're getting into some healthy rhythms. We love the team that we get to serve with here in Long Beach. We've got a combination of some full-time families that have moved out here with us, and as well as some bivocational families, and then also just getting to serve and learn alongside about 9 different networks that are pursuing movement out here in Los Angeles. Some of them we knew when we got here, some of them we didn't, and so it seems like momentum is really picking up. Well, we had already been praying and fasting for this area. The Lord put the West Coast on our heart, particularly greater Los Angeles. And we had been connected with some leaders like Jeff Timblin and Brett Butler up in Northern California, and the Aspinwall family. And so we were already walking with some folks, the folks, John and Evelyn Lowe at Epicenter, and had been connected with people through Steve Smith and through Carol Davis, who's a mentor to, I think, everybody in ministry out here in California. And so some introductions and relationships that were already established that once we moved out here, we were able to continue with. I actually took a sabbatical once we got out here and just helped transition our family. But once that finished, actually you came out with us, Steve, to visit, and we leveraged you being here to do like a 1-day vision day where we just kind of did an all call for NPL California people. Let's get together, and we just cast some vision for let's be a family of friends. Let's go after lostness in California. You're not alone. And we had, I don't know, we've had probably 85 people that showed up to that, and some fresh faces. And and then from that, we began to we met with a few of the key teams, like the team in Long Beach that you did an interview with Jeff Timblin and the Bridges Church. We did we thought, man, let's do some iron and irons. They've been through the training cycle, but let's get into some iron and irons with them. And so we're learning out in California, it's hard to get people to come to like a 4-day training or a 2-day training. We were doing a lot of like team size because of geography, because of traffic, because of time, and because of the weather. We're having to do smaller team size trainings in homes, in coffee shops, for a number of reasons. So we gathered with the Bridges Church team, and we, for like an afternoon iron and iron on a Sunday afternoon, and just asked the question, what's the vision? And everyone was really clear that they wanted to reach the 1.4 million of Long Beach and North Orange County with the gospel. And it was, just passionate. I said, that's great. On a scale of 1 to 10, how well do you think you are personally doing at accomplishing that vision? Like, put your finger up. And it was all ones around the room with a couple twos. And we just asked, okay, why is that? And it was, man, I'm not seeing movement. I'm not seeing fourth gen. We're not seeing what we read about and what the stories we hear on the podcasts, and not gotten to baptize anybody yet, or so they were disheartened. And what I just responded, I said, guys, I see you as an 11. Here's why. You're doing exactly what God's called you to do. You're praying and fasting. You're sharing the gospel. You're training believers, and you're forming catalytic teams. Like, if we talk about attempt great things for God and expect great things from God, these are the things that we can do to attempt great things for God. This is it. Pray and fast, share the gospel, train believers, form catalytic teams. So I'm like, you guys are doing those things, and we're just going to have to trust the results up to the Lord. And I had heard an illustration. I don't even know if this is true or not, but it's a good illustration, I think, about how bamboo grows. there's, I think a salesman told this as an illustration that if you plant bamboo in the ground, certain types of bamboo, that it can take up to 5 years for it to come to sprout to where you actually see it. And then once it comes through, it grows by the hour. And we just talked through different stories. Like, have you heard of Jeff Sundell's story? Like, they labored faithfully in Nepal for a couple of years. Kumar had come out here. Did you hear Kumar's story? Like we hear about the last 7 years, but we don't hear about the first 11 years. Have you heard Ying Kai's story and all these faithful leaders of it's not like these things happen overnight. God cares about what he's doing in you to shape you into the type of person he would entrust a movement. So just want to encourage them on informing their hearts on as far as like a timeline, and let's celebrate just obedience to Jesus. Let's enjoy that we get to do this together with others, and to really focus on growing in love for one another and love for the Lord, and that our abiding time would sustain us, but to really long for the things that we see in the scriptures of believing that God wants to do a movement here in California. So that was one thing we focused in on. And then we just gave some simple examples of, guys, let's, instead of looking for the person of peace, which we've trained you to do, like, you guys are Californians, you're local. Why don't you focus on being the person of peace? And given them some practical steps I took away from Ray, for example, hey, why don't you try to have 10-minute conversations with people in your oikos? And why don't you schedule oikos appointments, and it seems like Californians love to play. And so what are some things that you enjoy doing, hobbies that you could connect with some folks over? And then we had some stories like Jolene Burtz and how she was reaching her neighbors down in San Diego and started Discovery Bible Study by doing like a neighborhood like an ice cream social. And Rick and Jenny, who joined the climbing gym and reached the Middle Eastern man with the gospel, who's interested in studying the Bible. And so we had some stories that we could kind of share to cast some vision. Maya, I told you the story last episode of Maya leading her, the girl on the track team, to the faith, and her friends. So getting some, God just kind of gave us some stories to be able to share to cast vision, and just talked about slowing down, focus on oikos. We thought, based on our training, that we modeled so much of engaging 0 to 1 that they skipped over oikos. So just a refocus on oikos, a refocus on investing in those people around you and how to have those. It's not just a one and done, you're out of here. Like, you need to, you need to love these people, be Christian to your neighbors. And within weeks, we began to see gospel shares go up, and some people who began either discovered Bible studies or came to faith. And but I think most importantly in that, like, them realizing, like, we can't compare ourselves to an active movement. Like, we have to accept this is where we are. This is the soil that we're in. This is really hard soil. And let's focus on loving God, loving others, and obeying Jesus and making disciples. So we had that iron and iron. And again, it was in a home, team size. And we said, hey, set goals for the next 12 weeks. And then we're going to get together for a mid-level. And then we did that with 2 other teams where we met, iron and iron, set 12-week goals. Let's get together for a mid-level. Yeah. So after that iron and iron, which is like a problem-solving gathering with leaders, we set some 12-week goals that we were going to get together and do a mid-level retreat, which is a problem-solving retreat with leaders. It includes an iron and iron. And we saw progress in all the different teams at the mid-level retreats, where people were encouraged, that they were engaging oikos more. They were seeing some fruit from the harvest. We were seeing, because the vision we're laboring towards, it's like a 3-year benchmark, is 500 teams. And so we were seeing more and more teams that were forming. And so that was really encouraging for us. About that same time, we went to a gathering at Chuck Wood's home with Jeff Sundell and Ray Vaughn. And Ray was on his way to a different part of the world, just kind of debriefing on his time in Houston. And they challenged us that, hey guys, you're doing a lot of work with Legacy Church, which you and I both know is extremely valuable. But they said, don't miss the folks that are wanting to pursue a movement that might be outside of the Legacy Church, which we were doing. And I said, guys, I don't know how to find those people. So what do you do when you don't know? You got to pray and fast. And so that's going to be a theme today. We prayed and we fasted, and within weeks, God began to bring these different people into our life through the most random relationships that only God could get the glory for. And so we started meeting with Parker and Jesse Green, who had moved here from New York City to catalyze a movement of what they call micro churches. They started a church plant network called Salt Churches. And it was like the most random connection. Rick did a training in France with Christian Surfers International. And one of the guys there, like, you need to meet Parker. So we meet with Parker, and we're like, dude, are you a surfer? He's like, no, it's just the guy that you met, his church is called Salty and my church is called Salt. That's how we know each other. So it was just like, what? Like, okay. So again, like the point of that is just God's the one who began to pull these relationships together. And we met with them, and we're learning from the vision, the God-sized vision that God's given them. And we just began to identify, okay, what's the big vision that you have? Is there a clear path? And do you have simple tools? And just our basically our task at that point was meet with them in their living room, meet with them in the coffee shop, listen, serve, learn from what God's doing through them. It was, I realized in Indianapolis, it was Troy, reach your oikos and train others. In Japan, it was Troy, you're going to have to do this through other people because you're not Japanese. In Florida, it was a mix of both. But out here in California, it has been 100%. You're an outsider. You need to serve not just individuals, but network leaders that have already got a vision. Some of them have already developed their own training and processes, but they're hungry for community with other network leaders, and they're hungry for coaching from the Word. So over the past 12 months, we have connected with about 9 different church planting network leaders that most of them have started a church, and they either have begun to see multiplication or they have vision for movement. One key catalytic moment was like, you've been out here, and we've had Ray and Sarah have been out here, and Carter and Hannah. Like, we've got a bunch of different cool aunts and uncles that have come out, that just kind of sit with us and with the local leaders. And Ryan Alberson and his wife Lindsay came. They're coming through on their way overseas. And I was like, hey, Ryan, do you want to play or you want to work? He's like, I want to do both. I'm like, awesome. So Friday, I scheduled 6 different meetings with 6 different leaders that we were beginning to partner with. And Rick and I just listened to Ryan ask these amazing questions of these guys. And we got some feedback from him on, here's some things to press in on. And so that was on a Friday. On Monday, we pulled all of them together at Parker's house. And Ryan just began to cast vision for movement from what they saw God doing over in South Asia. And he got through telling his story, and he had planned a module, but you could see the eyes watering around the room. And it was like, hey man, I don't think we need the module. Like, let's just open this up. And they all were like, oh my gosh, we've dreamed of, like, what you're talking about is what God has called us to. And everyone was like, wow, I felt so alone. And in that moment, God just cast vision for this coalition of these leaders that wanted to see movement and didn't really know how they were going to get there. And that was a pivotal moment. And you just saw the Holy Spirit orchestrate it. And from that point, we began trying different things out. I was like, hey, let's get together once a month. And, that's not working. And hey, let's, we ended up just, let's just go, let's meet in their living room. We're driving all over greater Los Angeles. I don't know how many miles we put on the vehicle, and it's me and Rick and Puck, two or more of us, and taking different leaders or Timothy's with us, and answering questions. And finally, we got to a point where right now we're in a weekly rhythm with most of them, where for 2 to 3 hours, and we're just opening up and digging into. We were digging into Acts, and Jeff Sundell lovingly. It's about as close to rebuke as I've heard him had. He's like, bro, don't skip over Jesus. I know we want to see Paul do an Acts. He's like, don't skip over Jesus. I hear in your Four Fields trainings, you guys are doing the Mark 1. You're not doing Luke. Get back to Luke. They need to see it. And so we received that. And we have been going through particularly Luke 8-11 and just pulling Jesus' strategy out of the Bible. And, oh, man, Steve, like, it's there. Like, the questions that they have are being answered. And even if it's like not clear in that passage, it was so funny. We did like a 2-day mini intensive in Parker and Jesse's home with just them. And I really believe this was like a breakthrough for us. It's like, we can't get into a 4-day, but hey, can we get 2 days in your living room with you and our Bibles and just dig this out of the Luke and Acts? And so we did that with them. And it was so funny. Jesse, we got through 2 journeys, and then we modeled church with them. And Jesse goes, I can't do a 3rd journey. Like, I already know what we're supposed to do. Like, I cannot bear to do a 3rd journey. It's going to kill me because it's right in there. And they problem solved and made adjustments. And so we're in this rhythm now of meeting weekly with these local leaders, getting in the Word, encouraging them, setting goals, and then once a quarter they're gathering together for those iron on iron problem solvings. And then we're pulling them all together for, like a 6 to 8 hour strat meeting where worship, encourage one another, celebrate the wins, but also, what are the problems we're facing? Let's get into the Word to identify those problems and come up with some solutions. So it's blowing our minds what the Lord's doing on just networks level across the city. We mentioned Ryan. It was kind of like a filtering process, but the next one was when this Australian came through the United States and did this book tour. It was extremely catalytic. And one of the stops was in Long Beach. And when you came and cast vision and showed it from the Word, it was so, so helpful. And we leveraged you being here again, saying, hey, guys, we're going to get together at my house, and Steve's going to be there to do Q&A. And so it was in that moment where we used you as kind of bait, but we said, hey, you are the reason for them to get together. And then we just cast vision. So we believe you're not the only ones, but God clearly has his hand on your life. You each have vision for movement. What do you think about linking arms and going after the city together? And then we scheduled 2 months later an iron and iron gathering. And so that was we had been kind of meeting with different leaders separately for about 6 months after Ryan was here. And I felt like we really fortified that. And we did the iron and iron, and now in 2 weeks we're meeting for our second quarterly gathering with them.
Okay.
The other thing in that is, I mentioned Rick and Puck and I are driving to the different cities. Like, we have 2 guys in West LA, Mary up in Pasadena. We got several folks in Orange County, some up in Northridge, northern part of Los Angeles, some in Ventura County. So they're scattered all over. But as we go, we'll take like, hey, Parker, you want to come with us to meet with Pedro? And hey, Sean, you want to come over here and meet with Tien? Hey, Tien, can you meet with us with JT? And so we'll pull some of them together to get time with them, but also to kind of have them cross-pollinate. And because I think that's healthy. And they love being with one another. It's funny. Me and Rick and Puck drove up to one of these times with JT, and Tien was there, our Vietnamese brother who lives in Orange County. And it was like, we were like, should should we just let them meet? Like they don't really need us. Like they've got this. Like what if we just let, we're sitting in the car looking at them in the coffee shop talking, and it's like, yeah, this is where this goes, like where we're temporary, these guys are here. And so that's where we're at right now. The there's a few so I'm kind of giving you like, hey, this is what it's looking like on a city level, and we're learning how to, instead of coming in and pioneering a work from 0 to 1 or even our own strategy, we're learning how to serve other movement leaders across the city. They're here, and there's a mix of folks like JT and TN who have planted a legacy church and are catalyzing movement. I would say one of the big breakthroughs watching with JT, and I think you picked it up in the interview, was JT, looking back, he started a church in his home. He didn't leave his legacy church that he started, and he didn't try to force them into the church in his home. He started a church in his home and said, those who want to come, come. And he treats that like a church. He doesn't treat it like an experiment. He doesn't treat it like a, like church light. Like he treats that like a church. They've appointed elders. And out of that church, they've got 2nd gen churches that are seeing baptisms and 3rd gen disciples. And so going back to that principle of, man, one of the best things you can do is start a church in your home. And that's what JT has done. That's what Tien is doing. That's what a number of these other leaders are doing. It's just an observation, hindsight. Coming out west here to Los Angeles, and even going up to Northern California, where Brett and Jay Ashcraft and a number of others are laboring, the soil is very different here. When we were in Indy and I would say South Florida and other places in the U.S., if you go out in the harvest, you're going to see somebody say yes to Jesus. It might be a 2nd and 3rd soil that you find out later in discipleship that they weren't true disciples of Jesus, but you're at least going to see people say yes to Jesus. You offer prayer, people are going to say yes. And our observation out here is people are kind, but they're, it's like when we looked at the parable of the soils in Luke 8, that first soil where the enemy just comes and grabs it away. That is the most common response. It is no thanks, not interested. And we just see the enemy just grabbing the seed of the word away, the gospel away. And so it is different here. Like when we talk about what field are you stuck in, it's like, oh, well, we're hardly seeing any green lights. And so we're still stuck in fields 1 and 2. And I think the temptation in that is you start tweaking tools and you start, messing with, oh, this isn't working. Let's go back to, and I think just being assured from the word that this is what God has called us to do and trusting him. And it's in that season, like we have had to get on our faces and pray and fast and really focus on, Jesus's commands, including the Great Commission, not just Jesus' command of the Great Commission to make disciples. And it's growing us as we're loving one another. And, we started a church in our home called Movement Church, and really just growing as a church. And we did the month of prayer and fasting in January with a lot of people across the NoPlaceLeft network globally. And God gifted us at the end of that time with some fruit out of the harvest. There's a local brother named Tim Hutchison. He's with the Keystone Project based out of Houston. And Tim is he's a gospel force, but he is a humble brother. And Tim comes to a weekly prayer meeting that we have at Puck's house. And he's telling us that, guys, God led me to a person of peace. I'm like, don't tell us what happened. This is amazing. He said, well, Will Smith, who had served over in Asia, who's now serving in Atlanta. Will Smith was in town visiting, and he had lunch with Tim, and they're sitting at a Vietnamese restaurant in Fountain Valley at a banh mi shop. And this man named Lee comes up to the Vietnamese man and says, sees 2 white guys sitting in a Vietnamese sandwich shop. He goes, what are you guys doing here? And Tim says, hey man, I live here, but I moved here 3 years ago because I love Jesus and I love to tell others about him. Do you know Jesus? And this man, Lee, says, well, I'm Catholic, but I don't know Jesus. And Tim invites him to begin Discovery Bible Study. He starts going through what we would call the commands of Christ, basic commands of Jesus. And on week 2 on baptism, Mr. Lee says, I'm ready to give my life to Jesus. I want to be baptized right now. Like right now, yeah, right now. So they go to Tien's house and baptize him in Tien's pool. And Tim begins to walk with Lee, meeting with him 3 times a week, looking at the Bible, going out in the harvest together. This man is sharing at the temple. He's sharing with his family. And then Tim goes away for Christmas break and comes back, and Lee has shared with his Oikos. And we found out that he led his son-in-law, who lives in Vietnam, to faith in Jesus. And that he and his wife were planning to go over there for 3 months to invest in him, to take what he learned from Tim and to do with that man in Vietnam and to reach his Oikos in Vietnam. Well, we're just sitting there just like floored, like, what? That's amazing. And you could easily be so desperate to see God move that we could hear that story and think, all right, 2 white guys go to the sandwich shop and wait for somebody to come up to you, like it's some formula. And so we just asked Tim, Tim, tell us, I'm just curious, how long have you been laboring? He's like, 3 years. Like, do you guys have a healthy rhythm of praying and fasting? Yes, we pray and we fast all. So that's 3 years of praying and fasting. How many times have you shared the gospel in those 3 years? He's like, probably 1,000 times. And Tim's humble, so I know he's being conservative. And so it's like, that's what we need to hear, guys. We need to hear that Tim obeyed Jesus. He came out here. He's prayed and fasted for 3 years. He shared the gospel 1,000 times. He's training believers. He's forming teams. And then God said, all right, Tim, here you go. Here's this person of peace, this fourth soil person I'm going to entrust to you. And that's when the rapidness happens, then the gospel starts to spread. And Tim's meeting with him regularly for discipleship in the word. And the man's taking it back to Vietnam. So it's just like, that was the lesson for us. Guys, are we willing to live like Tim, to persevere in what seems like this isn't working, and just enjoy Jesus and enjoy one another and do the things that Jesus has called us to do. So that has really, it has brought lift to the teams here and encouragement to the teams here. There's some other encouraging stories. There was a chemistry professor named Jan and his wife, Janet, who's an orthodontist. They live up in Northridge, which is northern part of Los Angeles. And they went on a short-term trip with the IMB to South Asia, came back, and Jared connected them with us. And Puck began to drive up 2.5 hours every Wednesday with a couple disciples, and they would meet in their home and begin to go through the 411 and the commands of Christ and just spend time with them and answer questions. And they had a vision that they wanted to go to a very unreached part of the world. But they didn't know what to do. So Puck just began to show them, and model for them. And he said, Puck, I have shared the gospel with more people in the last 6 months than I have in my entire life combined. And they're seeing God work. He came up to a student who's from a very close country in the Middle East, and just asked the man, hey.
Hi. We scared him off.
I got a splinter.
Can you close the door?
I got a splinter.
You got a splinter? I'm so sorry. Did you say hi to Steve?
Hi, Steve.
So anyways, this man from this close country, Jan said, hey, is there any way I can pray for you? He goes, yeah, I'm lost. He goes, oh, okay, well, tell me why. And it turns out he was a sniper in the military. Yeah, he's riddled with guilt. And so Jan begins to explain to him that there's no way you're going to be able to forgive yourself. That has to come from God. And he unpacks the gospel using the 3 circles, and this man gives his life to Jesus. And Jan begins to walk with him in discipleship and just using the things that Puck had modeled for him in his home. His wife, who's an orthodontist, has led 2 of her coworkers to faith. She has started a Discovery Bible study with an Iranian woman. And Jan has also, there's a Kokyo sensei, I think is his name, a Japanese man who teaches martial arts on the campus there. He's in Discovery Bible study with him. And so this is just, hey, these are 2 extremely busy professionals that have a heart for the nations, that wanted to go but didn't know exactly what to do. That, Puck is modeling them with some Timothys in their home, and they're beginning to see the kingdom of God expand as they obey Jesus' great commission to make disciples. So we're parachuting in on years of faithfulness, years of praying and fasting, years of gospeling and hearts explaining. So it's just you see the Holy Spirit just kind of orchestrating this. There's also one of the big milestones for us and our church, Movement Church, is we were able to send out our first missionaries. There's a couple that, one from California, Gracie from California and John from Memphis, spent their first year of marriage here. And we were able to mobilize them to a close country. And that was we learned a ton from our time with them here. But that was a milestone for us. We have this vision for, Acts 13, right? You obey the Great Commission and God's going to send some people, And but we felt it, Steve, like, for the first, few weeks, Rick and Jenny had started a church with our kids, and John and Gracie went, overseas, and, we love them, we miss them, but just practically speaking, it's like we just mobilized all our worship leaders, and and the weeks that Kelly's not there, I was like, hey Rick, can we borrow some people? And it was like, what am I doing? Like we're just going to use Alexa. So we've had Alexa lead us in worship at times, but getting to send them out and to learn how to, as a church, not just send, but to love and serve and support them as they're serving overseas has been a milestone for us as a church. And every week in our churches, we're gathering in our home on Sunday afternoons, story after story of obedience to Jesus and sharing the gospel or loving somebody. Just this past week, Rachel has been ministering to a Sri Lankan woman at the grocery store down the street. Her name is Mika. And she had met with her a few weeks ago and shared the gospel. And Jeff Sundell has said that, man, the gospel is exploding in Sri Lanka right now. So if there's anybody out there and you got a heart for Sri Lanka, 60% response rate. If God's calling you there, let us know. But this woman, Mika, Rachel ran into her again just this last week. Said, "Hey, I've missed you. How are you doing?" She's like, "I have been thinking about you." And turns out this woman is so hungry for the scriptures. And she's like, I really, I love the Bible. I want to learn more. And I really am hungry for community. Do you have a church that I could go to? And she's like, the only problem is I work on Sunday mornings. And Rachel's like, oh, guess what? We meet at 4. It's like, that's great. I get off at 2. Can I come? Can I please come to your church and learn the Bible? And I want to know more about Jesus. And we're just like, what is happening? Are you kidding me? And my 9-year-old Lucy, this is all like coinciding after the month of prayer and fast. Our 9-year-old Rachel's been meeting with her for discipleship out of the word. And one day Lucy just says, I noticed we're sitting at breakfast together and she's got her giant adventure Bible. She's trying to put it in her bag. I'm like, what's going on? She's like, I'm going to share the gospel with my friend today. I was like, really? She's like, yeah, yep. It's like, what's your plan? She's like, I'm just going to use my Bible. Thought I'd start in Genesis. And it's like, okay, that sounds like a good plan. And she did it, man. She, at recess, we prayed together, and at recess, she took her Bible out and she explained the gospel to her friend, and her friend wanted to follow Jesus. And so the praying and the fasting has led to breakthrough. Some other teammates that well, Rick and Jenny, they were doing a House of Peace search in their own neighborhood, and they knocked on the door of a woman named Sarah who, this in America, we don't have royalty like they do in the UK and other places, but Kobe Bryant is probably the closest thing to royalty that LA has. And this woman was a nanny for one of Kobe Bryant's daughters. And so she knows a lot of people, and she gave her life to Jesus and began to reach her friends and to disciple her friends in her home. This is right in Rick and Jenny's neighborhood. There's another woman that we've met, that Jenny has met through the I Am Second site, that she's driven out to Inland Empire to begin to meet with her for discipleship. God's beginning to answer the years of faithful prayer and fasting and sharing. And I think a key in all this has been persevere. Don't be discouraged. Don't compare yourself. We're looking for God to move. And, what really, I think, clearly encouraged us with that was Roger Scholl, who spent some time in Houston. He's in Raleigh now. He came out and he did an assessment of the work here. And he interviewed, I think, 30 some team leaders across California. And he had some really helpful insights, but he said, guys, you've got some really committed leaders across California. And he said, all of them were envisioned into just, biblical movement from something like a lot of them from Movements podcast or a book like T4T or Movements to Change the World or an article, from Mission Frontiers or a video or something. They were envisioned by a number of different things, but all of them, the next step was they got to a training. And it was at the training that they realized, okay, I found my tribe. And now I have some clear steps of what to do next. And he said all of them for the next 2 to 3 years just persevered in the face of little to no visible fruit. And so that really encouraged, like, okay, we've got, God is not ours, but like we're getting to work with people that are persevering, and clinging to the promises of God and believing that because of what they see, they're not pragmatists, but they're biblicists. Because they see it here, they're going to do it. And that's been huge for us. I think one of the breakthroughs for us, like the vision cast that we use in our church every week, is Acts 2:36-47 of what a healthy church is. And we're putting the different things inside the church circle, like repent and believe and baptism and prayer and Lord's Supper and all those things. And so every week we were doing that, and we noticed that, we've got people driving from West LA and Orange County and other places to come to our church. And it's like, this doesn't seem right. Like, they're coming here to go to church. What about but then I realized there's nothing in our vision cast that would compel them to do anything other than gather here and be a healthy church. And so we tweaked that vision cast, of the church circle a bit, where we let's read on beyond Acts 2, that God mobilized people from that church. And it happened to be in Acts 8:1, persecution. But in Acts 13, we saw it was on purpose. Like out of those churches, God mobilized and began to multiply other disciples and churches. And so that became our vision cast, is that, we want to be a healthy church at Movement Church, but we also, we want to make disciples and in God's timing begin to plant other churches in the harvest. And if we aim, Ryan gave us hey, if we can aim for a 6 to 12 month doubling rate, that could be healthy, to see some sustained multiplication. And then if we begin to train, we can begin to start other churches or help other networks begin to have the same vision. And so I think we're never moving past being what a healthy church is, but we know that healthy things reproduce, right? And so this healthy church would reproduce. So it's allowing us just to focus on, let's never move past what's in here. Let's just keep doing what God's called us to do. And we're beginning to see these healthy churches and disciples multiply, Steve, in a city like Los Angeles. Like it's happening, and early stages, but man, it's amazing.